Hey everyone, it's Franchise Horror Reviews, and today we're going to talk about some shitty horror sequels. Alright, so I compiled a list of 10 movies that I think are honestly the worst horror sequels ever made. My list might not be the same as yours out there. You know, if you're a horror fan, everybody has those movies you feel a strong way about. I mean, I have seen many bad horror sequels in my time, okay? There are still some I haven't watched. Like, I haven't watched anything past Leprechaun 2. I haven't seen any of the Wishmaster movies. I haven't seen a couple of B/C type movie franchises from Full Moon Features and some other production companies that notoriously make bad movies. There's even some slasher franchises like Wrong Turn, where I've only seen like maybe the first 2 films. So there is a lot that I could uncover and maybe come back to and change. But as of now, I've compiled a list of 10 movies that I think go beyond just being heaping piles of garbage and transcend into becoming skid marks in underwear, piles of elephant dung, repugnant, rancid, putrid, sewer concoction type of movie. I'm being straight up with you. Every single one of these movies, I borderline will never watch again unless I have to do a franchise review. And some of these I do, maybe, just one, that I kind of think is so bad it's good, depending on the mood I'm in, sometimes. And one of the movies that I'm referring that to, I've only seen it twice. And I wouldn't mind seeing it a third time, but I had a solid 9, and I didn't know what else to put for a 10th spot. So I had to put my number 10 at default, just so you know. I don't want to piss a lot of diehard fans of this movie off when I introduce it as my number 10, but yeah, stay tuned for that. Alright, so I guess I'm going to try to keep this video kind of short. I don't want to spoil any of these movies. I just want to say my piece and move on. Okay, so strap in and let's talk about some shitty horror sequels. Alright, so number 10 is it's going to be Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. I know, a lot of you diehard fans of this movie are going to just go ahead and just spam the keyboard on my video here. I'll be up front. The Garbage Day line is absolute gold. It's up there with Halloween Resurrection and Busta Rhymes saying "trick or treat, motherfucker." You know, just true memeable lines. Or quotable lines you could put on a t-shirt, you know. The Garbage Day meme is a classic meme. And I think meme culture has made this movie, I don't know, kind of in the same vein as Troll 2, where they used to be considered like bad movies, and then there's kind of a reawakening. But honestly, I put this at number 10 because I didn't know what else to put here. Obviously, I could have did a cop-out and put Troll 2 here, and we all know that that movie's like so bad it's good. And this movie kind of is as well, even though I've only seen it 2 times. But I will say that this movie is just one of the worst horror sequels I think I've ever seen, for the straight up thing that this movie does. It's infuriating, and it does a clip show. You know, clip show movies and TV show episodes get on my ever-loving fucking nerve, okay? And this movie, literally, for like the first half or maybe even 2/3 of it, just recaps what Billy went through in the first movie. I think that's his name. And it's fucking annoying, okay? When you have a part 2, a sequel movie, you don't need to go this much in depth about the first movie in the second movie. I think this was the one that was the last theatrical release for this franchise before they went straight to video. And I know some of you might be upset, but I'm going to go ahead and warn you now. There's another Silent Night, Deadly Night sequel on this list. And some of them are fun, you know? But this one is just... It's fucking just really unnecessary with the clip show parts. And then when we get to the actual meat of the story with the new killer, good God Almighty. Good God Almighty. The acting, the directing is all abysmal. Like, straight abysmal. Now, the guy who plays the killer, I don't know his name, because like I said, I've only seen this movie twice. I've seen the first one quite a few times. But this guy, you know, bless his soul, tries with what he has. But good God. B-movie quality acting, if that is the best analogy I can give it. Like I said, the directing is terrible, but has maybe one redeeming factor to it. The unintentional comedy and some of the kills kind of make it revisitable. But if I'm being honest, in terms of a horror movie sequel, it has literally the most repugnant reason to exist. The main bulk of the story, the fresh story, is not enough to make a movie. And I can totally see why they decided to just recap the first one. Because why put in effort? They probably didn't have a script. I'm not going to claim to know a lot about this movie. They probably didn't have a script. And they just said, fuck it, we're just going to write whatever, bullshit around. And that's this movie. It's very, very, very bad in a lot of regards. It's a super rough watch. But it's the one movie on this list that is, I just have to put it here. Compared to every other sequel I've seen, I mean, I know people like to bitch and moan and groan about, you know, Jason Takes Manhattan, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, Jason X, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, Halloween Resurrection. You know, people love to bitch about those movies. But I don't think any of those are as bad as this. No way. No way, no way, no way. And number 9, we have Omen 4, The Awakening. Oh boy, this movie. Oh my God. It's directed by my favorite director ever, who tarnished one of my favorite horror sequels ever made, Halloween 4, by making Halloween 5. Dominique Othman and Gerard. You know, I'm kind of glad that his, you know, Hollywood film career made him become a straight-to-TV film director. And this movie is just abysmal to the core. Bafflingly stupid with its music, with its choice of how to go about making an Omen movie. Historically in this franchise, from the sequels I've seen, I haven't seen the remake, but I've seen the first 4. And out of the first 4, one of them feels like a slasher. The first one is kind of like a cult classic, and 3 and 4 just feel like rehashes of the first movie, except poorly done. Omen 3 is not that bad. But this movie has that Dominique Othman and Gerard stank all over it. It's not as, it is worse than Halloween 5, I will say that, and when I watch this movie, it makes me appreciate Halloween 5 more in a morbid way, even though I hate that movie. Oh, I don't know where to begin with this movie. The directing is pretty trash. You know, this film has like no budget, but some of the scenes just look awful. Like the guy staring at the damn wrecking ball. I will never forget how stupid that looks and how redundant it feels. And then the kill with the window pane cutting off the top of the car. You don't even see, like, you don't even really see blood in this. Or anything, like, scary at all. The girl character just feels like a dime store Damien. You know, her actress isn't that good. There are some, like, I guess the mom and the dad were decent actors. But the plot of this is just fucking stupid, man. And it's more or less just trying to rehash the first film and trying to replicate this. But there's the thing. When you bring just a bland plot with stupid music, stupid directing, stupid looking kills, shot sequences, it's just a plain old forgettable movie. But what makes this movie shit is you can tell by the quality of it. The quality of it is just fucking terrible. I mean, I have no words for, this is not as bad as some of the other ones below it, but this is definitely one that when I was making this list, I was like, oh yeah, this one definitely has to be on there. Yeah, Omen 4, The Awakening is just fucking shit. And number 8, I don't even know if people consider this a horror movie, but I have to bring this piece of shit up. The Crow, Wicked Prayer. Fuck this movie so hard. The Crow is one of my favorite movies ever made. It's grown on me for many years. I used to kind of like it growing up, and then I became like a massive fan of it over the years. And this movie, the 4th movie in this franchise, is the most ridiculous thing I think to ever come out of Miramax. I mean, you have Edward Furlong playing the Crow. You have Tara Reid starring in this movie as one of these characters that are involved with the slaying of the main character. And her acting's always bad in whatever movie she's in. You have Danny Trejo, which sometimes can make a movie gold, but he really doesn't bring a lot to the table here either. You got Chosen from The Karate Kid Part 2 and Cobra Kai, and his character might be the best character in this whole movie. Emmanuel Creaky, she's known for a few movies from the early 2000s. You see her character die. That was kind of sad, but what makes this movie awful and kind of funny at the same time is that, the red flag should be that Damon John, the founder of FUBU, you know him from Shark Tank. If you don't believe me, he's one of the producers on this movie. Why? I couldn't tell you, but I think this is his only film he's ever backed financially. He's even in the movie. I'm pretty confident they made this movie to keep film rights. They probably went to Damon John as an investor and be like, "Hey, nobody wants to make this piece of shit. Can you help fund the production of this? Because no production company wants to be involved in this." And he's like, "Oh yeah, sure." And this is why we got this movie. From the questionable dialogue, this movie has one of the worst dialogues I've ever seen in a horror movie. Or any movie, for that matter. Edward Furlong does not cut a crow. Like, he looks ridiculous. I don't want to see John Connor playing a role. Like, comparing Edward Furlong to Brandon Lee is almost like comparing Mike Myers to Tom Brady. I mean, it's like, no, this does not work, right? He looks terrible in the makeup. Like I said, the dialogue's trash. The plot is so fucking stupid. The movie never really moves around. The people involved who get killed are all just terrible characters, terribly acted. And it's one of those movies, I think people expect it to be bad. And if you go into it with that lens, you could probably have fun with it. I could totally see if you down maybe a 12-pack of beer, and you sat down and watched this movie, you can have fun with it. But it's absolute trash. Like, trash with skid marks all over it. The music isn't even that good. The directing is subpar at best. It's such a forgettable movie. It really is. Like, I have to remind myself sometimes when I wake up that this movie exists, and that makes my day even worse. Alright, number 7. I don't even know if this movie is technically official, but we're going to go with it anyway. We have Day of the Dead 2 Contagium. Holy shit. Now we're getting into the territory, you know, the first three are just movies that are just bad, terrible movies. But with a little bit of things that might be charming. This movie is fucking awful. This movie's production, director, right? Infamously only ever made 2 movies through this production company. Taurus whatever the fuck it's called. I don't even give a shit. They made this and Creepshow 3. 2 unofficial sequels to these franchises. Day of the Dead 2 Contagium is kind of a prequel, kind of a sequel, and mostly shit. It's baffling how bad this movie lays out its story, lays out its effects. The directing is nauseating to follow. The premise and the idea, the setup to this movie is so insultingly bad that you kind of want to enjoy it. But once this thing kicks on with, you know, I don't want to spoil any part of the plot, but when you see the effects, this is a zombie movie. When you see the effects of what causes the zombie outbreak to break out in present day, it's fucking unreal in the most fucking stupidest way possible. Okay? The dialogue and acting in this movie is atrocious. One thing I'll give it is the gore. The gore in this movie is pretty good. I'm not going to say great, but pretty good. Most of it, though, looks like Kool-Aid ketchup blood. It's just so much blood. And it's permeating in every scene. Like I said, these actors are bad, and the dialogue is terrible. And some of these kills and stuff, they don't even look like they were properly staged. The effects, like there's gun effects that look like the worst gun effects I've ever seen in any movie ever. The CGI is piss poor. When you see the army vehicles and the helicopter, look at the water on the street below and watch the car drive over the water and you'll see what I'm talking about. Shit is just cheap looking. Barely has any connection to Day of the Dead by George Romero. If George Romero were involved with making this film, I'd be shocked. I'd be honestly shocked. I don't know. I can't remember. This movie was 2005, so I think he might have been dead around that point. I forget when he died, honestly. I'm sure one of you will remind me in the comment section, but this movie's baffling. The final 20 minutes is where the movie finally kicks on its plot. The first opening section gives us just fucking stupid backstory to all of this. And I can see why people say this is like an in-name only sequel. And people in the comment section might say, oh, this movie's not official. Fuck it. It says Day of the Dead 2, Contagium. I'm going to take it like a sequel. It's terrible. This movie's fucking terrible. Go watch it if you don't believe me. I know a lot of people I've talked to you about this movie have never even heard of it or never even seen it. Do me a favor, go watch this movie and come back and tell me how bad it was. Okay? Alright, at number 6, it's a popular one that a lot of people have in their worst horror sequels ever, and it's Hellraiser Revelations. Dimension Extreme is literally the worst brand I've ever seen in movie history. Maybe next to Taurus Entertainment, the one that made Day of the Dead 2 Contagium. The fucking movies they put out in the late 2000s to avoid losing film rights, like Children of the Corn Genesis. This movie. You know, we can talk about the Rob Zombie sequels even, because, you know, that was under the Dimension brand. It's baffling. It's truly baffling how this movie ended up the way it is. You know, Doug Bradley didn't want to sign on a contract with forced work to do more movies. I don't blame him. He was in the franchise for so many years. And, you know, Dimension needed to keep the Hellraiser name, so they made this. And I know a lot of the history about this movie. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing from day to day. They had a lot of trouble with making the film. And I'll just be honest. You know, I'm sure the guy who plays Pinhead in this movie's a nice guy. But he's literally the worst looking thing I think I've ever seen. I think Stan Helsing's mockery of Pinhead looks better than this shit. Okay? The effects in this movie, the gore is okay. That's probably one of its saving graces. But other than that, the plot is as generic as you can think for a Hellraiser movie. It's incoherent. And there's bad dialogue and bad acting. Bad effects as well. This character guy who opens the Limerick figuration, his character is about as dry as a bone. And what they do with his character in the movie looks horrendous. You know, essentially makes a Pinhead sidekick, and that's as far as I'll go. It's so bad. This movie is such an, like, you know, I've called other movies abominations, but this movie is like the penultimate abomination to popular franchises. Like, if we're looking at across the spectrum for like mainstream franchises that go date back to the 80s, I would say that this one is objectively the worst of those, like, you know, Pinhead, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees days franchises that I've seen. I mean, this movie's absolutely dreadful on so many levels. This, like, seriously, don't watch this piece of shit. Go watch Judgment, something else. But if you happen to watch this, Godspeed. Alright, at number 5, I'm not going to waste anybody's fucking time with this. Jeepers Creepers Reborn. Good old 2022 actually brought in 2 movies that took off movies formerly on my list. I had Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation on it. And I don't know why I'm blanking on the other movie, but I had something else. But holy fuck, Jeepers Creepers Reborn. I don't want to hear anybody fucking complain about Jeepers Creepers 3 anymore, because this movie is fucking terrible. You know, Jeepers Creepers 3 is a bad movie. But this movie makes that bad movie look like fucking Shakespeare, okay? I can't explain why this movie looks so terrible. A lot of people who like to defend it say it was a COVID movie. That's why some of the things that were done look the way they do. That's why some of the makeup looks the way it does. That's why some of the quality looks the way it does. They had a CGI, literal background scenery for most of the fucking movie, and it looks literally the worst green screen effects you can possibly muster for a mainstream franchise like Jeepers Creepers. And I know the franchise is controversial, and I know a lot of people get a kick out of this movie being absolute trash. Guzzard, fucking vulture shit trash. But to me, Jeepers Creepers, the original, is one of my favorite movies of all time, and when I see this movie, it reminds me that most of the franchises I like have some really fucking bad entries in their sequels. This is easily one of the worst I've ever seen. I knew that when I was watching this, and during the 3-day limited thing at the theaters, I had free movie tickets, so I decided to go see it. You know, I said to myself, I'll never pay a dime, and I know that maybe the theater gets paid, you know, pays Victor Salva for this. Fuck Victor Salva. But I wanted to see it just in hopes that maybe it'll, you know, be better than Jeepers Creepers 3. But the fucking look of the creeper is absolutely dreadful. The leads in this movie are forgettable. The green screen CGI is absolutely embarrassing. It's embarrassing how bad it is. If this movie is not in Dollar Trees specifically. Like, when this gets a physical release, if it gets a $10 price tag or a $20 price tag for a fucking DVD of it, I recommend that people just take piles of it and burn it in the fucking trash can. If it's not in Dollar Tree, don't even buy it. Don't even waste your fucking money. It's literal dog shit. What they made the Creeper look like is it's seriously unforgivable. He looks terrible. He has like one expression the whole goddamn movie. The music is atrocious. The piss poor addition to some of these scenes to flesh out the story is embarrassing too. Yeah, I can totally see it's a COVID movie, but I'm not going to make that excuse for it. It shouldn't have been made. If you had to make a Jeepers Creepers movie during COVID, I would just say fucking put a fork in it and wait till COVID's over and then make it. Yeah, fuck this movie. Alright, number 4. I know this movie I'm bringing up is not even from a horror franchise. Yes, I'm bringing up a movie that has a horror entry, but it's not exactly a horror franchise. And it's Bring It On, Cheer or Die. Oh, fuck. I made the grave mistake of mentioning that Bring It On was getting a horror sequel to my girlfriend. And we watched this on Sci-Fi On Demand. And I thought I was going to go this schlocky route and be fun, like those campy 80s, you know, girl party movies. But it's just horrendous on almost every single level imaginable. Maybe the biggest star power in this movie is Missy Pyle, who you might know from famous movies like Home Alone 4, where she plays Marv's wife, who's played by French Stewart. She was on like Mad TV. Maybe she was in some other shit. But other than that, all these actresses are fucking forgettable as shit. Never seen them in anything. The lead girl's alright. Her acting is pretty decent. But where this movie is just god-awful is that it's trying to splice a generic slasher, a PG-13 generic slasher, with no gore or brutality. It did try to do some creative kills, but it's such a fucking C/D movie with it, and it tries to be serious instead of campy with it. And what happens is that you got this should-be campy movie, but it's serious toned, and it does not work. The kills look terrible. The whole slasher premise is generic as fuck. There's this school angle where they get trapped in the school, and all these cheerleaders, you know, use their cheerleading abilities to help fight the killer and escape death and shit. Fuck it. It's so stupid. And I'd be shocked if I didn't say that this is still better than some of the Bring It On direct-to-video sequels that came before it. But this is fucking easily one of the worst horror movies I've ever seen. Why this thing even exists. A PG-13, Bring It On, straight-to-video slasher film that's Sci-Fi produced. Just let that sentence sink into your brains, people. Fuck. Alright, at number 3, now we're getting to the 3, like, I'm pretty confident that these are going to be the forever 3 to me. We're going to talk about Howling 7, New Moon Rising. Okay, I just want to get something off my chest about this. The fucking werewolf effects remind me of the Goosebumps TV show. And for that, accompanied with the rock music when this happens, makes me, you know, feel like a kid inside. But minus that, this movie, I'm pretty sure they play in hell to torment people in the afterlife. This has to be the most piss-poor, bland, boring, and nauseatingly fucking irritating movie I've ever had to sit through. It's not as bad as the two above it, because this movie doesn't infuriate me that much. Because like I said, I get a little bit of, my inner child with that werewolf transformation scene, but the whole country music shit and these characters are just, oh my god, some of the worst written characters I've ever seen in horror movies. The plot just drags so hard, and it tries to introduce all these characters from movies before it, and while that's cool, it doesn't do anything special with it whatsoever. Most of this movie takes place out in and outside of this fucking country bar, and they're constantly playing country music. Just, I think for like the first 25-30 minutes, it's just country fucking music. And when you get to this finding out who the werewolf is, it's like a whodunit. And when you find out, and you see who's the werewolf, and you see these transformations, it looks fucking terrible. Goosebumps, the TV show, literally had these same exact effects, and they had a, Canadian children's television series budget in the mid-90s. This is a fucking 7th film in a horror franchise. The Howling is a great movie. One of the best werewolf films out there. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember really liking it. And this movie, in the mid-90s, comes out. Straight to video. There's a reason why in America they've never released this movie on DVD, because they know it's absolute garbage. They can't even release it on like an Echo Bridge 15 movie collection. Just to fucking say, oh look, hey, we got a Howling 7 release here. This movie, the characters are just bland. The acting is piss poor. There are some moments that make me laugh with certain characters, but man, the plot in this is non-existent. And when it does kick on, it's weak on all cylinders. It's just so blatantly awful to sit through. Like literally, if you want to torture yourself, you can go watch this movie. I don't recommend it, but you can. Don't say I didn't warn you, though. Alright, and number 2 is the other Silent Night, Deadly Night film I want to bring up. It's Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, Better Watch Out. Holy fuck. I have seen some really jarring stuff in my time. Not like in like the perturbed way or like making me feel uncomfortable. But when I watched this movie, I literally winced the entire way through it. On paper, you got Bill Moseley coming back to be the character from Part 2, who's apparently survived the events, even though he didn't get shot in his fucking brain. And they've made him into like a robot cyborg guy. And what he does, Bill Moseley plays the killer. I don't have anything against Bill Moseley. I think most of the stuff he's been in is fine. But holy shit, this is one of the absolute dumbest, and not even a fun way. It's one of the dumbest horror movies I've ever seen. Like straight up. The pacing of this movie is nauseating. It's so fucking slow. It feels like 4 fucking hours watching this movie. And when you do get some action, the kills are off screen and they look generic and bland. Some people like the hospital death kill. Fuck that shit. It's not that good. Okay? And then when you see the killer chasing the characters around, he just fucking walks like a fucking bumbling buffoon and nothing happens. Nothing interesting happens. It's plot narrative and it's bad bad writing. Just horrible dialogue, horrible premise. Bill Moseley might be the saving grace. The final girl's alright. But the end product is just a steaming pile of elephant dung. It literally... When I watched the franchise, you know, around Christmas last year, this was like the first... I've only seen this movie one time. I watched the first one, I was like, okay. I watched the second one, I was like, oh shit. And then I watched this one, I'm like, oh fuck, it can't get any worse than this. And I watched part 4 and 5, and it got a little bit better. And the remake. But this is literally, like, if I had to put a finger on it, the worst slasher movie I've ever seen, I've seen some pretty bad ones. This has to be the worst slasher I've ever seen. Personally. I know a lot of you might be out there saying, oh no, there's way worse. Oh, I believe you. I believe you. But if we're talking sequel movies, this has to be the worst slasher sequel I think I've ever seen in my life. In my life. I don't know. Like, I would maybe show this movie to the deaf and blind. If they paid me. And the number one worst horror movie sequel ever, to me, is Creepshow 3. Oh yeah, fuck this movie. Right up its ass. You know, all the movies before this, I will give some credit where credit's due with those. It may not seem like some of them tried. Maybe not Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, but this movie tries the least out of all of them. It's another one of those tourist entertainment movies made by the same people who did Day of the Dead 2, Contagium. And what they did to the Creepshow legacy in this is fucking unforgivable. It's the most unforgivable sin I've ever seen a legacy sequel, even though some people say it's unofficial. Fuck that shit. It has Creepshow in it. I'm considering it official. What they did to the legacy of the original Creepshow movie is outright disgusting. Like, seriously. They did so much wrong in this movie. They tried to do this whole Pulp Fiction element, telling stories in and out of order. They tried to introduce the animation element from the former movies, and it looks god-awful. It literally looks like a 6th grader took a bunch of index cards and doodled a fucking cartoon on it and just played it in front of the camera, just flipping the damn index cards. That's how bad this shit looks. The CGI is some of the worst CGI I have ever seen in any movie. Ever. The writing of these 5 stories are so bland and half-assed. These ideas could work in some of these segments. But the problem is, there's just no fucking substance or any original ideas to come of it. The characters in these stories are all fucking terrible characters with forgettable actors. You don't give a shit about any of these actors or characters. In almost every single story, there's something completely just off-the-wall, outrageous, and intelligence insulting going on. And then the way they close out this movie, too. Fuck this movie. It seriously is the worst thing I've ever seen. It might very well be the worst movie of all time I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen some really hokey, schlocky movies, especially some 60s and 70s. If you're willing to watch and sit down through some 60s and 70s drive-in schlock, some people might say that those movies are terrible compared to this. But holy fuck, this is bad. For a mid-2000s film, I know HBO contracted this movie, but this is just a whole nother level of bad. This transcends being garbage. This becomes fucking garbage atoms. Fucking making a garbage nuclear bomb. And when you watch this movie, I would not blame anybody if you had the direct impulse to want to punch a hole right through your disc. Because it's this bad. I urge anybody with a sense of reason, if you're out there and you're a huge fan of the Creepshow franchise, or any horror anthology franchise, don't ever, 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 ever watch this movie. Take it from me, and you'll have a happy life. Alright, so those are the 10 worst horror sequels I have ever seen. Let me know down in the comment section what movies would be on your list for worst horror sequels ever. I'm dying to chat with you about that. Do you like some of the movies that I put on my list? Do you agree with me for the movies I put on my list? I want to hear some feedback and engage with you all out there. Just keep it respectful and nerd on. See you later.